Hi, everyone. As you entered the room today, there was some books available for everyone. If you didn't take your copy on the way in, please take it on the way out. This is a book by Brad Feld. It's called Give First, The Power of Mentorship. Brad couldn't be with us in person today, but he is going to join us hopefully live on the screen in a moment. Brad is a partner and co-founder of a Boulder-based venture capital firm called Foundry. It's not the first venture capital firm that he's been a founder of. He's been an early stage investor and entrepreneur for over 35 years since he founded his first company, Feld Technologies, when he was back in college. Brad's also a co-founder of Techstars, and we've been long-term partners with Techstars. Brad also has, and he's written a number of books, many of them around community. And as part of one of the books that he wrote about startup communities, in which he was talking about Boulder, which is his startup community, his alma mater, so to speak. As part of that, he did a book tour, and he actually came and spoke at Notman House. And it was many, many years ago, I think back in 2014. And it was actually at the time that Notman House was doing its fundraising campaign. And we had a target of $125,000, and we were very, very close. Brad turned up to give this talk. He got to experience Notman House, and he got to know the story about it. And next thing do we know, we go and look on the website, the GoFundMe or whatever it was, and we see there's an extra $1,000 which has just come in from Brad, and it happened to be the $1,000 that pushed us over the 125,000 mark. So there's been a long-term relationship between Real and Brad and Techstars, but also a long-term relationship between Brad and Montreal and Montreal's startup community. I hope you got to hear that intro, Brad. And
I did. It was an intro to make my mother proud.
There we go. I love it. I love it. Well, it's great to have you. Maybe I could just quickly ask, what energy are you showing up with today?
I'm pretty content today. I am in San Francisco today and tomorrow for a couple of keynotes. One at the National Venture Capital Association. Has the 5th year anniversary of something called Venture Forward, which was the program they started 5 years ago to help get more women and underrepresented people involved in venture capital. And I was one of the first funders of that. So that's pretty satisfying. And then tomorrow I'm doing a keynote at Google with an organization that used to be called Him for Her, that's now called Illumine. That's the largest network of board-ready women and women who are on boards, public and private. It's about 15,000 women. So I'm pretty content. I feel like I'm in the middle of a couple of interesting conversations that satisfy me.
That's beautiful. And, I know that in addition to the venture side of things, the Techstars type of things, you and Amy also sort of co-founded the Anchor Point Foundation. And that's something which is sort of very resonant with the type of stuff you're talking about, where there's a real willingness to sort of give back and to catalyze other movements. So it sounds like this is all part of that continued direction.
Yeah, it's all internally consistent with the way we are. We don't have any kids, and I don't really believe in the concept of legacy. So the idea of what happens after I'm dead, I'll be dead. And so I'm more interested in engaging with it while I'm here, and to the extent that I can do stuff that fits within my value system and is additive to the world from that frame of reference. It's really satisfying.
Well, unfortunately, Brad, you're not doing very well around not having legacy. You have had a profound impact on many, many things and many, many people, me included. When I was trying to work out some of the big steps that I needed to take next and who it is that I might speak to, what coaches I might to do. I'm sure you recall that you were actually one of the very first person I sent you an email to, and you connected me with someone who you trust very, very dearly in terms of the coaching world, Jerry Colonna. And you continue to do that. And in terms of legacy, you've written numerous books, but we're here today to really look about the latest book. The latest book is called Give First, The Power of Mentorship. And I read through the book, highlighted much of it, and it really is sort of resonating very deeply with Real, because mentorship has always been central to how we support, which is why we've done Founder Fuel, why we've supported Techstars, which is obviously mentorship-driven acceleration. But I'd like to sort of dig, to use the time today to dig a little deeper into the behaviors behind Give First. You almost called this book something different, or it had a different angle when it started. And particularly how to connect with something we've been thinking a lot about now, and that's how founders become anti-fragile. And not just resilient in the face of stress, but actually stronger because of it. And as I read your book, and I won't steal all the punchline because I think everyone's going to read through your book. They all have a copy of it in the audience. But there were a number of things that as I read it did tie in very much to this anti-fragile. But maybe we can start by this philosophy of Give First. And it's simple to say, but it's hard to practice. And especially as I read it, this part about giving without expectation. And so what does Give First mean? What doesn't it mean? And why is the absence of expectation so essential?
Well, so thanks for having me, by the way. It's delightful to be here remotely. Like the ability to do this kind of stuff this way and have still be useful is makes life a little bit easier. I want to be clear on the start of the discussion that Give First is the philosophy, and so I'm really glad you referred to it that way. It's not a religion. It's not a set of rules. In the same way, this book, as it goes deep on mentorship, is not focused on rules of if you do these things, you will be a good mentor, but instead try to help bring to life effective ways to be an effective mentor. So the notion of the philosophy of Give First is really important, because in a religion, you can follow these rules, and depending on whatever your religious tradition is, if you follow these rules, good things will theoretically happen. In a philosophy, the goal of a philosophy is to stimulate you to think. It's to provoke you to take pieces of that philosophy that resonate with you, that make sense to you, and incorporate it into your way of being. Not 100% of the time, not in everything you do, not in all ways, but just be additive. So that was part of my hope with this book. The definition of Give First, which I first wrote about in a book called Startup Communities in 2012. This was the book John was referring to with my trip to Notman House. Was I had a paragraph in that book, so it was almost an afterthought. I hadn't really thought very hard about this. I just wrote it because I was trying to stimulate people to understand what they needed to do to build and create vibrant startup communities. That definition is that you're willing to put energy into a system without defining upfront what you're going to get back. However, it's not altruistic. You do expect to get something back. You just don't know when, from whom, over what time period, in what form, or what consideration. And when I first wrote about this, I actually called the paragraph in the book was labeled Give Before You Get, which is a particularly annoying hashtag. So a guy named Greg Cochran at Techstars turned it into Give First, and that's where the label came from. That book came out about 6 months before another book, which is very, very famous now by a guy named Adam Grant, came out, which was called Give and Take. And I didn't know Adam, he didn't know me. We've become good friends since. His book was really profound because for me, that Startup Communities book and everything I wrote around this concept of startup communities was anecdotal. It was from my own experience. There was no research supporting it. Adam is an organizational psychologist at Wharton, and he did a bunch of research, and his research was essentially separating people into three categories: givers, takers, and matchers. And those definitions are well labeled. Matchers are, I'll give you this, you give me that. And of course, givers are at one end, takers are at the other. And what he found was that over a long period of time, givers benefit the most and are the most successful. He also found that in short term, in terms of transactional activity, often givers lose. So it's givers are the most successful long term, but they're also the least successful with regard to short-term dynamics. So this is some of the dissonance that gets created when you think about this as a philosophy. Importantly, when I've sort of worked it into the way I'm almost 60. So when I look back over the last 40 years and sort of how I've approached things, the number of things that have come out of using this philosophy, not 100% of the time. I'm a venture capitalist. I invest in companies. When somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, you're the give first to VC," I'll tell you what. Why don't you give me $5 million and sometime in the future I'll give you something. And I'm like, no, there's transactions in my world. Like approaching so many different things, people, systems this way has had profound impacts downstream that I could have never anticipated. And I'll sort of leave you with three words that I think link back to the antifragile theme. The first is that the essence of give first is that it's non-transaction. You're willing to engage without defining a transaction. Second, it's positive sum. I personally hate the phrase win-win. And when somebody says win-win-win, it just makes me cringe. It's just sort of marketing language. It doesn't mean anything. But positive sum does. Positive sum is both parties benefit, but they might benefit in different levels of magnitude, different consideration, but it's positive for both parties or all parties. Zero sum, almost by definition, means that the winner wins what the loser loses. And so sort of for me, this notion that we could do things that are positive sum that actually have a positive impact on all participants, it's really powerful. And then the last is that it's a multi-turn game, which is that you're not doing things one time. You're doing things with people, with systems over and over and over again. And so your behavior accrues over time. If you're a taker, you become known as a taker. If you're somebody who's constantly playing a zero-sum game, you become known as somebody who constantly plays a zero-sum game. Can you be successful? Of course. Is that a satisfying way for my frame of reference to live? No, not interesting to me. And importantly, from the perspective of, and I'll tie it again back to this notion of antifragile, I've had a lot of success. I've also had a lot of failure. And every successful company I've been involved in fact, every company I've been involved in has had at least one near-death experience. And a lot of them died. This near-death experience caused death for the company, not for the person, not for the people. There's an enormous amount of learning from those experiences. And even in the success cases where they had one or more near-death experience, I heard a great talk. I was at yesterday at the Aspen Venture Summit out in Aspen, Colorado. We had a collection of about 200 people came, and a bunch of founders, and then a bunch of investors from outside Colorado came to them. And Mark Stevens, who one of his was ex-Sequoia, one of his famous investments was NVIDIA, which today is an extraordinarily successful company. And he told about the 3 times NVIDIA almost died in the 1990s, literally almost died, and how some of the characteristics of the CEO Jensen and the team and the culture and the norms have, persisted even to this day. And, you step back from that, I think having a philosophy, whatever your philosophy is important as a starting point. I think many people don't really know what their own philosophy is. They're just reacting to things. For founders, one of the great things about being a founder is you get to define the cultural norms of your company. You get to define the philosophy and approach that you take to what you're doing. And hopefully with some of the work that I've done, whether it's around sort of communities or around this new book, Give First, or some of the other ideas that I've tried to get out into the world, sort of this notion of engaging non-transactionally, engaging with a positive sum view, engaging with this multi-term, long-term frame of reference gets woven into things.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea that you're going to give, but you do anticipate getting something back, but that you don't know where it's going to come back. We've been talking about complexity and maybe introduction of differentiating that from complicated. Complicated would mean, hey, I know if I do this, then that will probably happen and that will probably happen. But you're operating very much from a complex world and you're not even trying to understand it. It's almost like you're placing your faith in the universe. And you used a word in your book, you believe in magic and randomness. And like there's a whole bunch of stories that you said to do that. Can you just expand a bit about this idea of how do you live in a complex world through just faith and magic?
Well, the word, and I say magic tongue in cheek, so, I would really like to believe in magic for reals. But I think randomness is the more important of the two words. Complex is a really important and significant concept. And so I'll actually extend it a little bit more in a book I wrote in 2020 called The Startup Community Way. So it was a second book that I wrote about startup communities. It was a little more rigorous, a little more academic. I had a co-author, Ian Hathaway, who was a data researcher, econometrics, sort of big thinker, but also willing to dive in and do some research. And we were hunting in this book for a construct or a concept to hang the book around. And we came up with the idea of complex adaptive systems and the assertion that a startup community is a complex adaptive system. And in fact, many of the things that we encounter are complex adaptive systems, including, frankly, almost every company that I've ever been involved in. And John, you made a good distinction between complicated and complexity. Complicated generally has a deterministic outcome. You can say what you think the outcome is going to be. A complex system does not have a deterministic outcome. The outcome will be different based on what happens along the way. An interesting thing to ponder the next time you play with Claudia or ChatGPT. I like to call Claude Claudia because I wish more of the AIs had interesting names. And you chat with them, the kinds of questions you ask them cause the things you get back to be different. And you can actually very easily get any of the chatbots to contradict themselves without much effort. You can get them to apologize for making a mistake that maybe they made, maybe they didn't, but just through the way that you interact with them because of what they do, because they're complex systems and not deterministic. There's another type of system that's the next step, which is chaotic, which in addition to being non-deterministic, does not follow the inputs and the outputs. It's just sort of even more random on the other side of that. Chaotic systems are completely uncomfortable. Complex systems are merely uncomfortable. Complicated systems are often hard, but they're comfortable. And simple systems are not hard, nor are they, and they're comfortable. So I live kind of the way I try to approach my life is that I'm living in a complex system. The outputs of things I do, and I could say we, it doesn't have to be me. The outputs of what we do are inputs to the things that happen. By the way, it's one way to rationalize learning from success and failure is that each of the things we do, a founder really is starting from a perspective of coming up with a hypothesis, running an experiment. Most experiments fail. You learn something about what failed, what didn't work. You modify your hypothesis. You run another experiment. When it works, you do a lot more of that. Now, if you make at accumulated knowledge, and like, let's just pick a software vector, which is B2B software, B2B SaaS, which I think most people are pretty comfortable with at this point talking about. There's a whole bunch of things that are now very predictable and predictive for B2B SaaS companies, except for they're now encountering a completely different type of technology infrastructure, which is agentic AI. And the idea that this new type of technology infrastructure, whether you believe it is awesome or not, doesn't matter. It's changing the dynamics of what the normal outputs were as they become inputs into this complex system. And so for founders like, well, no, look, this worked forever this way, and now it's going to work forever this way. That's not how it happens. They change constantly. I'm sure, Clayton Christensen, unfortunately has passed away. But I don't know, 30 years ago, he wrote The Innovator's Dilemma or something like this, this concept that you have to constantly be dealing with new inputs that are unpredictable, that change this non-deterministic outcome. So I'll tie this to randomness and maybe magic if you want to pay me with that brush. For me, part of the beauty of approaching systems without having an expectation of what you're going to get out of them is that you allow yourself to be open to randomness. You allow yourself to engage with people, organizations, ideas that are new, that you don't know where they're going to go. You're not doing it because you expect to have a particular outcome. And for me, I'll give concrete examples, and I tell some stories in the book, but a concrete example of that is Techstars itself. The simple version of that is I became very high profile in Colorado in about 2003, 4, 5, somewhere in that time period. I had a lot of successful investments. I was, sort of well known nationally as an investor, obviously well known within Colorado. I was very accessible. If you send me an email, I'll respond to it. My email address is not hidden. It's just my name, brad@feld.com. And so, I, on a daily basis, I'd gotten to the point where I was getting a steady stream of emails from anyone who was coming to Colorado for any reason. My friend's daughter is getting married and I'll be in Denver. Do you have time for a cup of coffee? I'm going skiing on a ski vacation. When I come back, can I meet you for a cup of coffee? And it got to the point where if I said yes to everything, all I'd ever do is drink coffee and go to the bathroom. And so I decided to start having this thing I call Random Day, which was once a month. I'd meet with 15 to 20 people, 15 minutes. I created an online scheduling thing. So people had to do a little work to go online and type their name into a thing and put on their calendar. And then I usually did it in public somewhere. Sometimes I did it in my office. I just holed up for a day and had 15-minute meetings. And my goal of those meetings were to do two things. One was learn one thing for me. So I have to learn something. And help the person that was meeting with me in at least one way. And a lot of times that was introductions, but it could be lots of different things. And I did that for about a decade, so probably 1,000 meetings like that. A couple of years in the middle of the day, the person that showed up for my Random Day meeting slot, that particular one, was a guy named David Cohen. I didn't know David, never met him. It turned out we'd both been angel investors in a company together that wasn't really going anywhere. He had been a successful founder in Boulder, didn't know him, our paths had never crossed. And he presented to me, slid a piece of paper across the table and presented to me the idea for what became Techstars. And I can't listen and read at the same time. So he was trying to tell me about it. I'm like, let me just read this. You put some effort into it. So I read it. Yeah, 4 or 5 minutes into the meeting, I said to him, that was great, a really cool idea. I said, look, as long as you're not a flake or a crook, which I can find out pretty easily with a couple of emails, I'm in. He described what he wanted to do. He was going to put in $80,000, and his business partner, David Brown, was going to put in $50,000, and they wanted another $100,000 just to validate from some other investors. So I said, I'm good for 50K. Or you want 100? Okay, hang on a second. I walk out of the room. I call a longtime friend of mine, a guy named Jared Polis, very successful founder who's now a governor of Colorado, but at the time he was a founder of a couple of companies, and we'd done some stuff together. And I said, hey, Jared, it's Brad. I'm going to put $50,000 in this thing called Techstars. Can I tell you about it? And Jared's response was, I'm in. What is it? And that's how Techstars got started. And if you said to me 20 years later, 19 years later, Techstars would have funded almost 5,000 companies around the world, and it would have had the impact that it's had. With all of the ups and downs, Techstars as an organization has had lots of successes, made mistakes, done some things that didn't make sense, done some things that have been really, impactful. That wasn't what it was. It was just kind of this random moment. And I could give you many, many, many stories like that, but like approaching systems, people, problems, organizations with that kind of philosophy. Not 100% of your time. I didn't do random day every day.
Yeah.
I didn't do random day all the time. It's just a slice.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about in the context of this, and that's the essence of living in a complex system.
There's a question in my head. I'm just trying to balance time here. So, Brad, what's going to happen? I might ask you one more question, just a quick question. And then, if it's okay, if you just sit with us, meditate for a couple of minutes, we're going to ask the audience to just talk for 2 minutes between themselves, and then come back and have the audience see what emerges for a couple more questions for you. Hopefully that's okay. My last question, I'm going to be very pointed at it so you can answer it short and quick. You talked about you can't read and listen at the same time. And one of the things that you really talk about is presence and listening. And it struck, and I'd just like you to speak to what you have learned through your life about the importance of listening and the practice, or how hard it is. Just to sort of give people a sense, because it's a key area for what we think about too.
Well, it could be profound. For me, I learned in my late teens, early 20s, that I learned by reading and writing. And that listening and talking cemented the ideas. And so for me, I got very lucky and learned that in college. I think a lot of people struggle with how to do it. So an example would be when I was coming on the previous session had slides, and the person was talking. I didn't recognize who it was. The person was talking, and the slides had bullet points on them. Today, I would do one of two things. I would either close my eyes and listen to the person, or I would read the slides and not hear a word the person said. And like understanding how your brain processes information is actually a really useful thing that a lot of people don't get to, because there's lots of different ways. Interestingly, when you think about this dichotomy, there's not a right way or a wrong way, and of course it's a spectrum. But from my frame of reference, what I've always tried to do, and it's the reason I write so much, is that I develop the ideas by reading and writing. And then things like this, it's not I'm just repeating a set of lines or giving a prepared speech. I like to do fireside chats because I don't actually care what the questions are. I don't want to know them in advance. Because these are thoughts in my head that I've worked out. But now I'm being challenged to put them together in different ways to answer the question for whatever the group is. And that cements the ideas for me. That causes them to become much more rigorous. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah.
The side comment for that, my storytelling is genetic. My father's stories are all 50% too long, and so at least mine are only 20% too long.
Beautiful. Okay, Brad, so I'm just going to pass it over to Pete. If you can just stay with us and observe, it would be awesome.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So we're going to help Brad think a little bit more. What I'd love for you to do is turn to somebody you haven't chatted with yet in our conversations so far, and you can go two routes. One, you can just what's something that this conversation has you thinking about, like so far, or better yet, what's a question that you have for Brad? And I'm going to harvest a few of those questions, and then we'll see what Brad's thinking does with that. So take about 2.5 minutes to do that. Just chat with each other around one of those topics, and then I'll ring the bell and we'll come back. Have at it. All right, thank you. So what I'd love to do is harvest a handful of questions, and then we'll let Brad respond. So anybody, a question that came out of your conversation that, for Brad? Raise your hand. We got mics back here. There's a lot of talking, no questions? Here we go. Alan.
Brad, John's first question was about your energy today. And I felt in our conversation, you brought incredible energy through the screen. I wonder if you have any hints or advice to us to how to bring that energy when we're so much on Zoom or Teams or Google Meet.
Great. Okay. I'm gonna grab a bunch of questions and then you can respond. Here we go.
Hi. Yeah, since you're kind of an OG in the VC space, I'm curious of your opinion about the transformation of the VC ecosystem, meaning I think the 0 to 1 phase will be very similar, but with AI agent, I feel the scaling will require a lot less human resources. We'll have like AI agentic system helping scaling. So maybe we'll see less B, C, D rounds in the future. I'm just curious about if you thought about this.
Excellent. Here we go, in front.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I'm just curious about your exploration of complex systems, and one of the most complex systems are ecosystems and the natural systems that we're inhabiting, the bioregions that we're surrounded by. And I'm curious about using the millions of years of evolution to mirror our systems that we develop, our human systems, our financial systems, our companies, our businesses, and mirroring those against the complex systems of the ecosystems and the bioregions that we're surrounded by. If you have any thoughts or takes on that.
And that was exactly my question.
Love that.
Wow, simpatico.
Yay.
Okay, maybe one more before we let Brad get after it. Oh, and back here? Yeah, you had your hand up?
Hi, so I'm curious if you've observed in others or in yourself in adopting your philosophy of giving, how does that change you?
Beautiful. All right, take it away, Brad.
These are fun. All right, so energy that I'm bringing today. Thanks for the nice words. I have a couple of things I do because I've been a remote worker for a very long time. Even when I lived in Boston in the 90s, I always traveled all around the U.S. because of my first company. I had lots of clients everywhere, and then when I started investing, I always invested in lots of different places. So I had to train myself early with current technology and the way we do things. Number one is I never have myself on the screen. So I always turn self view off no matter what I'm doing. And so really I'm looking at whoever I'm engaging with, whether I'm looking at the room or I'm looking at the person. Second, I always maximize the screen. And so I'm looking at a full screen, and that's all I'm really engaging with. And the last is I try to be very disciplined. I'm not perfect because we all get bored and our minds drift.
I wasn't bored here, so my mind didn't drift. But I try really hard not to end up switching between going down other screens, checking my email, whatever. And if I need to take notes for something, I have a very simple way of doing that, sort of set up on the screen so it's very predictable all the time. And really, it just comes down to I just try to be here. I try to listen, I try to engage completely. I don't see very well. You can't tell from my glasses, but I have very thick glasses. My wife jokes all the time. We'll be looking out, the window, and she'll say something like, giraffe or elephant or, as a bird flying. She could say anything. I don't see anything, right? It's not cooperative for me. So the fidelity, maybe that's an advantage, is the fidelity on the other side isn't important to me. But like being, be here now. That's kind of it. On the second question around the transformation of VC ecosystems, I kind of like the question. It's something I've been playing with lately. And I'll tell you what I'm playing with to try to figure out whether it's real. I don't know yet. But the premise of 0 to 1 is the same. So the raw startup requires the same kind of human energy and human labor. But what happens is you're scaling up a business. I think right now we're dealing with an enormous amount of noise versus signal. And anyone who's tried to do anything really in a significant way that goes beyond surface level, with a few exceptions, has probably been pretty disappointed. There's some obvious places where the existing technology has dramatic impact. Software development, customer service are the two easy ones. But as you get sort of further and you say, well, how do I replace employees in this part of my business? Less obvious. And in fact, some of the complexity is making the new technology is making that harder. We're also in a weird place with venture capital. A very large amount of what we're seeing in terms of financings today, I would not consider to be venture capital. Writing $100 million checks at $10 billion valuations for companies that don't have a lot of revenue, writing $1 billion seed round checks, that's something different. Now, nothing wrong with it, but it is different. And the expectations and modality of that tends to be different. For me, what I'm trying to figure out, I used to write software until the early 90s, and I didn't write software for many years. And as a hobby, I'm writing software again using modern tooling and AI tools and some agentic AI stuff. And it's been a really fun hobby because I've learned a ton. I can actually do stuff again because of the AI tooling that I really, for the last 20 years, had been limited because the learning curve's too steep. I don't have enough time. And interestingly, on top of it all, the question that I'm trying to answer is, can you actually create a real company that has very few employees? So is there a way to build a startup functionally that runs on a few humans and a lot of technology infrastructure that can scale? I don't know the answer yet. And if somebody asserts the truth of that, I think they're extrapolating. And there's a couple of stories already of the one person that sold his company for $60 million and stuff like that. But I think people are generalizing off of one example rather than actually understanding what the pieces are yet. The biosystems question. I think that the two people that said that they would ask that question, I think you'll both love the book, The Startup Community Way. And so I'll be Brad, the book salesman, for a minute. Which is one of my alter egos. I have another alter ego named Spike, and he's my AI alter ego, and I have an alter ego named Howie, and he's my scheduling AI scheduler alter ego. But Brad the Book Salesman says, buy a copy of The Startup Community Way. We interweave a lot of concepts around startup communities and the way ecosystems in nature develop. And then personally, my wife, until recently, was vice chair of the Nature Conservancy, which is a very large global organization. One of our big philanthropic thrusts and areas of interest is in conservation and climate and real research around that. And I would say that there's so much for us as a species, especially in business,
to learn from the way stuff that's not us evolves. In Aspen, where we have a house and spend a lot of time in our backyard, we have a river, and all the cliches about you never step in the same river twice because the water's always moving. We have giant trees, including aspen trees, if you don't know, or a fascinating type of tree. It's a single root system. Each tree is a root pointing up. And, you'll find, 6,000, 10,000 tree aspen groves. The trees have been here long before us and will be here long after us. The dynamics of how, forests grow and develop and, whether human beings cut them down or they burn down, sort of the regeneration that happens. Of course, one of the things we've been doing as a species very aggressively is terraforming this planet, right? Trying to conform this planet to our needs the way we want. And the planet rejects a lot of that. So there's a lot of stuff in there that has great and very, very juicy and delightful parallels. I think that we, by the way, get lost a lot in the beauty of it. And, for someone who spends a lot of time, I'm a trail runner, spend a lot of time out in the mountains, out in the middle of nowhere alone, by myself. If that's not you, I encourage it. I encourage it from the standpoint of just kind of grounding yourself in, again, randomness might be the right word, the beauty, the magnificence of all the things we deal with. And then last, I know we're out of time, but last, how has Give First changed me? I've been on this kind of a trajectory for a very long time in terms of my own thinking. Hang on one sec. Hi. Yep. Oh, okay. I'm all set. I'm on a conference call. Okay. Hey, just leave it on the. Thanks. Sorry. Anyway, the way Give First has impacted me is, I think, really brought me in a lot of ways back to the center for me of what I care about and what's most important. And it's given me philosophically something, a way to put voice to it in a way that, for the last 10 or 20 years I've struggled with and tried to figure out. But never really had the right language or the right label for it in a way that worked for me. So hopefully that's a couple of quick hits.
Thank you, Brad. I know you've got to go. Thank you so much for all of the engaging discussion. It really has been wondrous to have you dialed in here. I mentioned Jerry Colonna before, and he wrote the book about the art of growing up. And you say that you're almost 60. I'm much younger than you, and I hope that I can be more like you when I grow up. So thank you so much, Brad.
John, you've been a delightful friend for many, many years, and thanks for having me. I hope this was interesting and useful to everyone today. Absolutely. You had.
Thank you, Brad.